Hi, folks. This is Sarah Marshall, your operations architect, and this is the fifth dispatch in the leadership dispatch series. Let's just jump right into it. Last time we started the discussion in part one about elevating practices. I walked you through the 5 elevating practices we were talking about and warned you that none of these are easy, but if you can master them, your purpose will be served well. We talked about unconditional commitments and intense presence in the last session. We're going to talk about extreme awareness, tactical focus, and surrendering to our growth in this one. And let's just get into it. So, mastering our awareness. I'm going to tell you a story about when I was training to be a martial arts instructor. And when I first started, I had to learn how to teach a class. So I had to write a lesson plan, and then I had to go execute on that lesson plan once my teacher agreed to the lesson plan that I had developed. And I would go out and execute that lesson plan until I became proficient. And once I became proficient, he threw on the next task. He said, okay, teach the same lesson plan, but you want to teach that lesson plan to each of the involved folks at their level. So the beginners get a beginning version of that lesson. The middle arena folks get the kind of the middle arena lesson, and the senior folks, the black belts and such, they get a more senior lesson. So I started differentiating my lesson plan and make it more easy. I'm calling that multitasking, but we're going to talk about multitasking more in a few minutes. Once I got proficient at teaching that differentiated lesson plan at levels, I then had to customize the lesson plan to the student. And that means understanding the student's physical capability, any injuries they might have, any goals they have, and what they're trying to develop, and then focus the lesson plan to customize to their particular needs. Once I got proficient at that, then my teacher told me I had to teach 2 classes at once, and those classes are in different rooms. Now, multitasking has been proven to be, there's no such thing. There's actually single tasking, but you're rapidly moving from task to task. And if you do it like that, you will lose proficiency and productivity. And when you're doing it, when you're teaching 2 classes at once, it becomes even worse. So the idea was that I would have to delegate responsibilities as I moved from class to class to make sure that nothing was lost or nothing was dropped in the process. And then delegating to the more senior students to keep things moving, I could effectively move from class to class and keep everything moving. Once I got proficient at that, my instructor told me I had to also run the front of the school, which meant dealing with new people coming in, free lessons, administration, etc., all while teaching the classes at the same time. And once I got proficient at that, I then he would come in at any time and say, okay, what's going on out in the street? Now that would be difficult enough given everything else that I had going on, but I also, or the front of the school, the windows were painted over, so I couldn't actually see on the street. So I had to depend on my hearing, I had to depend on my sense of smell, I had to depend on my previous knowledge of what that street looks like and what goes on it, to be able to answer that question every time he asked. So the idea was that he continually ratcheted up my focus and my attention on these activities until my awareness was extreme and broad as I was teaching my classes in the school. That's mastering awareness. And you can take that concept into whatever work you want to do or your focus on, whatever problem you're trying to solve, and continue to ratchet up your awareness so that you have a broad and deep understanding of everything that's going on around you while you're focusing on the tasks at hand. We've already discussed focus in strategic focus in previous dispatches. This time we're going to tackle focus from a more tactical point of view. In other words, how are you dealing with day-to-day stuff? And this quadrant that you're looking at, or at least the sides of it, are from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's an easy way to understand the concept of the focus. Whereas you want to spend most of your attention on urgent and important things, and this is quadrant 1, these are the things that you're doing. You're focusing on the crisis situation or a project deadline or a pressing problem. You're dealing with something that you have to do right now. Other important things to focus on are quadrant 2 things. They're important but not urgent. They're the planning activities, the relationship building activities, the personal development activities. These develop capacity and you need to do them, but you need to do them in concert with the quadrant 1 stuff. The stuff below that is not important, and you could argue that you don't want to do any of it, but that is never quite true. There is a quadrant 3 things, which are things that are urgent, interruptions, phone calls, etc., that you need to manage. And the idea here is you either delegate these or you schedule them into narrow confines so they don't screw up your quadrant 1 or quadrant 2 work. And finally, there's quadrant 4, which is basically stuff to eliminate time wasters, trivial activities, and this concept of excessive relaxation. We need relaxation to replenish ourselves, but excessive relaxation is just avoiding doing the stuff that we need to be doing. So the idea here is to really focus ourselves in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 and manage the other stuff to keep these things at the forefront. That is tactical focus. The last area to talk about is surrendering to change, and this is going to take a little bit of a story to tell you. In surrendering to change, we are doing the work that gets us to develop and improve ourselves. And because we are doing that, and because we are developing ourselves to lead others and meaningfully support stakeholders and deliver things, we are definitely working on ourselves and driving change through ourselves. And since the biggest change that we are going to experience is ourselves, we really should surrender to it so we get the biggest benefit from all the work and activity that we're dealing with. To illustrate that, I want to talk about a movie called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Came out in 2013. And in that movie, Walter transforms from a passive dreamer into an active participant. What the situation was, Life magazine was shutting down its print division. It was no longer going to publish the magazine, and they were about to publish the last one before going online. A new management team came in, and they're kind of bullies, kind of mean, and they're putting a lot of pressure on the folks in the organization. Walter was what's called a negative assets manager. In other words, he was responsible for all the film negatives that came in and setting them up and prepping them for print in the magazine. And Sean McConnell was their best photographer and sent a package in with prints and said that this particular print that he referenced was the quintessence of his work and should be on the magazine's cover. Well, the print was missing. Now, Walter was initially a working schlub. He was very passive, narrowly focused, narrow impact, and he could be pushed around quite easily. He tended to live in a dream life of the work outside of the work that he was actually doing, dreaming of adventure and heroics. But he was really pretty contained and lived. If you looked at him, he lived a gray, dull life. He just didn't look like much. He could be pushed around, and he was just kind of internalized. When this problem happened that the negative was missing, Walter could have done one of two things. He could have just let it go and just lived his quiet life. But instead, he was really committed to the quality and delivery of this published magazine and supporting Sean McConnell. So instead, he decided to go find Sean McConnell and get that negative. And in short order, he became a detective sifting through the clues of where Sean's whereabouts might be, and then ended up leaving the country going to look for him. He ended up jumping out of a helicopter into the Atlantic Ocean to catch a fishing boat. He skated on a skateboard down a mountain in front of an erupting volcano, and finally he scaled the Afghani Himalayas to find Sean. And when he finds Sean, he finds out that he had had the negative all along in a wallet that Sean had gifted him. And so you could call that adventure of no point because he didn't need to go on it in the first place to find the picture. However, he did need to go on that adventure to find himself. It forever changed him. He was now full with agency. He was an actor on his own part. He was no longer pushed around by the management team of this company, and he was much more satisfied with his life. His rich interior life had become his real life because he'd gone on this adventure. And that's what surrendering to change is. He went on this adventure and allowed it to change him inextricably from what he was to what he really wanted to be. That's surrendering to change. So in these last two dispatches, we talked about 5 ways to elevate yourself, and they are difficult practices, difficult to master. They're challenges to do, but if you do work on these, you will absolutely support your journey through unconditional commitments. You will be able to lead large movements, be a powerhouse, because nothing's going to stop you from delivering on that commitment. The capacity we've developed besides unconditional commitment is intense presence, broad and multi-level awareness, jealous protection of our focus, and a willingness to surrender to the changes that happen to us as we go through this process. You can read more about unconditional commitment and these elevating practices and Are You All in my on my blog. The article is on my blog, www.operations-architect.com. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and as always, feedback is welcome.